Hi everyone. Yeah, it's hit 7 o'clock, and thank you so much for joining us for the final night of the Association for the Study of Australian Literature annual conference. So far, it's been a really wonderful series of events, and many poetry events as part of that. So this is kind of the anchor leg for the conference, and we've got a really great lineup, and each poet is going to read for about 10 minutes or so. And so I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm here on Wiradjuri land and pay my respects to the elders past, present and emerging. And I'd ask that the poets as they read, if they'd like to do those acknowledgements, that would be great. Maybe 1 hour ago, I was in this position with a blue puppet recording a kid's talk for my church. So it's great to be staring at a screen doing something a little different and hearing some other kinds of creativity. And yeah, great to see all the faces and names who've joined us, 33 people so far. And I'm sure more people will be in and out. So yeah, really fantastic. So I'd like to introduce our first poet for this evening, and that's Gareth Jenkins. Now, Gareth sent me a bio. I'd like to welcome Gareth. Gareth's first poetry collection, Recipes for the Disaster, co-won the 2019 Anne Elder Award and was highly commended in the Mary Gilmore Award, which is the award for the first book of poetry published, and it's run by the association. He's the editor of The Toy of the Spirit, the collected writings of Anthony Mannix, and he archives and publishes experimental creative work at the Apothecary Archive. So welcome, Gareth, and we're really looking forward to hearing you read.
Thanks, Lachlan. That's great. And yes, I'm coming to you from Gadigal land in Alexandria. I'm just going to start my stopwatch so I don't go over. I'm going to read, we can't see, from a couple of things from Recipes for the Disaster, a kind of longish one to start. And then I'll read some new work, and if I've got time left over, I'll read something else. But yeah, this first one's about 5 minutes. Book's in 3 parts, and each part ends with a long kind of prose poem about a character named Owen. And I realised that the new work I'm reading is also about this strange character. So yeah, this is the second of the 3, but each I think kind of stand alone. So this is called The Everywhere Anywhere 2. It's about a bath in a factory beside a marina on the outskirts of the Everywhere Anywhere. It's about the right eye and a radical pair reunion, electromagnetic flight paths of migration. It's about number, how it's a resonant skin that warp wraps the everything anything. It's about that night Owen grabs me from the street corner, drags me into the ambulance and drives me, hanging his head out of the window, vibrating a storm into the distance. It's about that night Owen says, "It's time," and all the numbers in that. His hair stands on end and mine too as I lie in the back strapped to a gurney. The ambulance has a police scanner tuned to the frequency of the police talking about looking for an ambulance, so I think maybe this time someone will find me. But nobody ever does. Owen's small like a small boy, but strong like a big man. He's like the boy I saw that time behind the Cobb & Co mail stop. There was this rotten piano beautifully out of tune round the back being played by a woman with a violin spine. I walked away from all that down to a little pathetic stream, and there was this boy there. I asked him what he was doing, and he said he was dragging dead soldiers out of the river. He was sweating and kind of staggering under their weight. There was nobody but him down Owen is like that boy and the other boy in my art class, the one that painted the picture of the huge wave and the tiny surfer and the shadow beneath it all. He said the tiny surfer was him, and I said, is the shadow a whale? He said he didn't know what the shadow was, but his cold sores did. The next week he painted another picture all in red. It had a man in it looking through a telescope, and he left a big empty circle in the sky and said, next week I'll fill that in so you know what he's been watching. Owen is like that boy too. Powerful and jittery, like an electric storm coming in over a marina on the outskirts of the everywhere, anywhere, making waves in the everything, anything. After we have driven, we come to a factory, and the factory is a lot like the factory I visited once with the performance collective, the Plimsoll Line. We were going to use it in a show about Owen, but then we didn't, because we didn't do the show because we couldn't get any money to do it. Owen puts me in a porcelain bathtub and I keep the bathtub company, and he says, we are only lifted briefly from sequence into breath, a disturbance in the infinite resonance. He repeats this over and over and won't shut up, so I cannot sleep. Wind currents blast waves in Earth's magnetic fields. The sea has risen. Owen brought in the tide and with it a whale from our deep, circling in the marina, singing bass obliteration. Owen looks out the window. I've got this whale now, but I don't know what to do with it. Owen's always had problems with motivation. That's because he's really just a kid down by the river collecting bodies and a painter covering canvases in red. Owen has never made any sense, but I just can't seem to give up on him. 14 years now. We're like some kind of radical pair oscillating. We're like migratory birds, guided by the magnetoreceptors in our right eyes. The day is clouded with rain. Street lamps stay on. Their hum accompanies the everything, anything, a harmony crying, the whales circling in the storm, singing the sharp edge of vibration, the meager resistance of skin. Inside, outside, claw at one another. Owen's a map on my retina, visionary surface of the mind. I'm a break in a smooth arc of porcelain. I breathe lightly. The earth, a giant magnet, guiding us home. So that's that one. So I thought I'd read something new, which I hope will be, my next book. But it's quite another long, continual narrative, I suppose, rather than a collection of poems. And it goes back to Owen originally was kind of born, I suppose, in a sound work that I did, and this piece will include the sound work, but also discuss what was happening in and around the sound work at the time. So this is just two very small parts of it, and I've just numbered them for the sake of tonight so that we can make some sense of it anyway. So this number one. Remember the darkness and the cold, the art performance and the beautiful teenagers. Remember the World War II bunker chambers, those dead birds and that kind of Christ. All this in the month you meet the other two, and the other two after that, the Owens. Here the heart of the installation. I may be conflating. It's not entirely their fault, just mostly. This has nothing to do with that baseline of revealing we were talking about earlier. Don't hang on for that. It's not worth it. I said we'd get close, but we've already done that. 2. In this night time we breathe like everyone else who is living breathes. but we see our breath coming out because of the cold and the way the beam of light from the projector is beaming across the air we are breathing. We are in that World War II bunker chamber, in the opening where the cannon used to be, halfway up the cliff face facing the ocean. Now there is just a ring of squat metal struts and a burnt book we are filming. It's a black square like that other black square we'll be talking about later. Flakes of burnt paper, that 0 point of painting. A few days ago you counted 87 dead birds on the beach. Last week you dragged an old wooden railway sleeper down to the sand thinking you were some kind of Christ. Kind of, just toying with the metaphor rather than living it. As the wind gusts, the burnt pages lift up and disintegrate. It's a great metaphor, she says, but she's not talking about the book, and we are not in the bunker chamber when she says it, and it's not even her anyway. But it is a great metaphor. For what, I say? She doesn't answer, and I don't really need her to. She's not wearing her glasses on her even more beautiful face with all those shadows. Back in the chambers, the book has been blown into dark flakes like dark skin, like dark paint. This is a good metaphor for what is coming, for what has been, the black square portal for transmigration. Back on the beach, you carve a large eye at the top of the sleeper to wake it from sleeping. It takes 3 nights. You dig a hole and plant it like it is looking out to sea. On the 4th night, you just go down and watch. Beautiful teenagers yell out, "Who performed art on this wood?" You don't say anything and they can't see you, and then they go swimming, cold as it is. The pluming flame from the steelworks offers no warmth, lights the underside of clouds like a sunset explosion. The next day you find the 87 birds. It's said they died of exhaustion on their winter migration. All right, that's about 10 minutes, so I'll leave it there.
Thanks so much, Gareth. Yeah, that was amazing. And it was great to, I got that sense of some kind of prepositional expansion in that first poem. And then, yeah, those points, particular points of narrowing and deftness in the second one. And so thank you so much for sharing with us. We're going to hear from Aidan Coleman now. And so this is the second time I've got to introduce Aidan at this conference. And so Aidan's a visiting research fellow in the School of Humanities and an early career researcher in the James Coetzee Centre for Creative Practice at the University of Adelaide, and his reviews and critical writing have appeared in the Australian Cordite, Harvard Review Online and Text. He's currently writing a biography of the poet John Forbes with assistance from the Australia Council for the Arts and Arts South Australia, and his PhD thesis on John Forbes was awarded a University of Adelaide medal for doctoral research, and I hope that he's going to read some of the poems that formed part of that thesis, but we will see, because they're really remarkable pieces. So yeah, great to have you with us, Aidan, from South Australia. You'll need to put yourself off mute.
Glad I've checked. You can hear me now?
Sure
yep.
Can.
Yep, good. Okay, I am reading from Mount Sumptuous, which is published by Wakefield Press this year. And I've just got a new piece I'll read at the end. So I'll read, I think, 5 poems from Mount Sumptuous. They're all short, and then the new piece. Cartoon Snow. When your freezer is cluttered as a library return chute, you realise the benefits of cartoon snow. The sugar cubes of igloo bricks, well storied in their crisp divisions. The daybreak of those dazzling acres you would dress for. Go when a blue night is snowing to itself, shushing the hour-wide forest. How gently it erases fox prints and sleigh tracks, the stamp of hoof and hunter's boot, the vexatious sharp edges of our past. Retire once more to the puffing cottage, its windows a blazing marmalade. Inside, the huskies have quit their howling to settle for the uncluttered life, the idea of north. Is that loud enough? Yeah, good. Okay, I've got some colour poems that run through the book, just titled Primary and Secondary, and this is Primary Red, which will be obvious from the first line. My first car read as a half-sucked Jaffa, the crackling bacon of its radio, the brick of all meat towns you dress to kill on Fridays, the O of mouths and round of targets, you recall in panic big letters, the shining apple from a story best avoided. Red is not my favourite colour, the child screams over khaki shorts and wounded knee. Now the teacher chastens gently in lowercase green. Band-Aid. Animals attack whichever celebrity. Everything else can be summed up as tennis. Statues yanked out and the squares fill with custard. Day's equation adjusts incrementally for agile pushers, precarious trucks, darks and neons plucked from our mouths before we could ask. What of those shades of menace we lost? Simply a matter of costume. Your plane dropped eggs on hapless villains who, accordingly chastened, went home. And this next poem is for my kids. It's called Barbarian Studies. Weather in which I might be elsewhere, lounging, book in hand, Tim Tams, dark perhaps, tea a given, instead of the uphill pram push of swaying kids, singing drunkenly, what a coachman circa 1840 or his horse felt probably, or the wind millennia before, roughly when the Vikings, for all their poetry, at least did their own rowing, unlikely as they are to pop up nowadays in ads for fathers with proportional custody, although they would do well in this park where dogs in loose and scratchy orbits nosy about the margins of the gated playground, and kids jostle, shove and swing like wrecking balls, like ambassadors whose sending we regret. The park is full of aggro dads. I, poet, am one. And this is another colour poem. This is secondary, and it's orange. Easier to paint than rhyme this volatility, a poet envy of the art fluke, or rightness cut in segments sucked to the pith. A plaintive case deflating on a snack bar counter where citrus men swash fizz through lunch and later repair the voltage of night in the out-of-sync bounce of signal and blinker. You take a little kindling, the light of a cupped match, to hazard across deciduous campuses the vast blue continent of theory. Go softly on. And I'd like to finish with a new poem I wrote this afternoon. And it's a bit rough. It needs a bit more drafting before I send it off to the Paris review. but it's about the conference, and I'd like to dedicate it to Roger and his team. It's called Cairns 2020. There we weren't in shorts and thongs, our papers jotted on postcards before the serious fun of volleyball and the big hammock swinging contest, a three-way tie between Susan, Kate and Fiona. Michael lobs a coconut over Julian's protests. Into the crowd gathered around Toby, reading from book 4 of the Agro Palms Fight Back. And we follow his ambulance to A&E, which is actually a pool built round a bar where there's a surplus of inflatable rafts and daiquiris for Toby's head. Each evening, we ride those giant turtles that tour guides promise but rarely deliver. Roger, riding the biggest turtle, beckons us towards the sunset, because 6 p.m. is not too late to seek a newer world. Back on the beach, Joseph minds our flash drives and phones as Lynn, lounging beside him, rings for pizza and another umbrella. And the turtles, who are simply happy to be useful, don't mind at all. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Aidan. That was remarkable. Those images of the turtles, and there's Roger. Thank you so much. Yeah, brilliant stuff. I often, when I was, if you have a chance to get Mount Sumptuous, take a look at the footnotes, because they've got a kind of they've got a kind of humour to them and a voice that I think is kind of a very, very clever, sardonic voice that uses footnotes in a different way. But thanks so much, Aidan. It's been really great to have you read and have you with us over the course of the conference. Are we up to Sarah Day, I think? So it's a real honour to be able to introduce Sarah, who's well known across Australian and UK poetry. Her most recent books, Towards Light and Tempo from Puncher and Wattmann, were shortlisted for the Tasmanian Premier's Literary Awards and the Prime Minister's Literary Awards. And the latter also received the Wesley Michelle Wright Prize. She's been awarded many times for previous work, including the Queensland Premier's Judith Wright ACT and Victoria's Anne Elders Awards. She was poetry editor of Ireland for 7 years, and she lives in Hobart, where she takes an active interest in Tasmanian environmental politics. Her poetry has been published and translated in a number of countries and is set to music in the UK and Australia. So there we go, Claire, we can start our ensemble and start to play some of these things. And Sarah is beginning a PhD candidature with UQ. So it's great to have you with us, and thanks for sharing, Sarah.
Thanks, Lachlan. And hi, everyone. Thanks for attending tonight. Thanks to ASAL for the invitation, and to all the previous panelists, so the poetry panelists this week. It's been really enjoyable hearing everyone. I'm speaking to you from Lutruwita, Tasmania. I acknowledge with deep respect the Muwinina people, the traditional owners of this land around Hobart, who cared for and protected country for many thousands of years, and I pay my respect to elders past and present, and to the Tasmanian Aboriginal community who continue to care for country. I'm mostly going to be reading from my most recent collection, Towards Light, and fairly short poems tonight. I'm going to start with something a bit upbeat in tone called Aix-en-Provence. Her climax, when it came, was operatic. The whole marketplace hanging on rising notes that flew through shutters to join the blue, blue sky. Saturday morning shoppers, begonias, sunflowers blazing in tall buckets, brazen watermelons, the patient hands of the town hall clock, all arrested as one. Scarlet chrysanthemums opened themselves like sea anemones in a warm current. Women touched the blooms, handled ripe tomatoes, smiled at one another, tourists and old women in aprons alike. I don't know what men felt, but perhaps women felt opened, released. Perhaps we were exposed. The bananas looked yellower, the grapes more purple, the marigolds bolder. People glanced shyly to the open window on the first floor of the cobbled square. Did they expect her to appear? Then a large man in a tiny three-wheeled truck entered the scene, revving hard in low gear, as if everything depended on his heavy load of something green. Above the crowd, a strand of cloud tidied the sky back together, and the minute hand of the inscrutable clock moved on, as custom required. Fog. Lake St. Clair, Tasmania. Picture a deep lake, wild forests sloping steeply to the shores, mountain peaks where waters bend out of sight behind the distant headland. Now erase the scene with fog, thick fog, so that before you there is neither land nor lake nor sky. There is just a jetty to which a small green ferry boat is tied, floating on pigeon grey air. Imagine the stillness. Nothing moves or whispers. Great black boulders with their rings of lichen also float. For a moment, the sun and its watery rainbow-ringed companion glow dimly through the fog. Erase them too. The ferryman needs to be undistracted as he unhooks the painter and reverses a quiet arc. Your last glimpse of him in profile, his dark cap pulled low over his ears, an upright silhouette at the wheel. The little prow nose up, optimistic. Man, ferry, empty seats vanishing into the vacuum. Gone before you can draw breath, leaving only this high-definition concrete jetty with its rusting pillars and yellow parallel lines like a highway's, bolting towards the blank unknown, and the mute pulse in the grey-white fog of an engine going somewhere. Think of him, the ferryman, if he were ever there at all, on the illusory lake, his implacable blindness. This next one, I was walking through a paddock in Canberra towards a music festival and fell into step with a woman who within the space of a couple of minutes told me that her mother had died recently and that she was needing to find magnetic north again. So this is poems thanks to her. It's called Fe, or Iron on the Periodic Table. Magnetic north is always on the move, looping its slow, deep subterranean loops around true north, which it eludes like an errant partner in an Arctic dance. Whoops, gliding now at 40k per year from Canada towards Siberia, like a planchette on a weed jar. Anyone would think these shifts might derange a homebound salmon and rearrange the map for pigeon, turtle, snow goose, or the coded alphabet inside the honeybee dance. It all seems set to confuse, but fails. Blood hears more than its own euphony, as the sliding behemoth in fits and starts quietly adjusts our compasses, our hearts. Sea ice. The slowly setting sun lights up the cracks in sea ice. An aerial view might show that what appears a solid mass reacts, is not insensible to change. The facts are obfuscated, though the slowly setting sun lights up the widening cracks. Frazzle ice is granular and lacks a crust. The heft and turbulence below stirs up a slush. The solid mass reacts, reacts as now the waterline like wax recedes, yields up the pieces of the self below. The slowly setting sun lights up the cracks. The mind, like salt encased in ice, refracts, less light reflected into space. Who knows how a solid mass of white reacts? This state of dissolution now enacts a breaking up of everything. Green and low, the slowly setting sun lights up the cracks, and what appears a solid mass reacts. Wooden horse. How am I going for time? I forgot to check what time I began.
You're going pretty well. There's two readers after you. So.
Right, I'll just read two more. Big punch bowl. And I'd like to acknowledge Jim Puralia Everett for reading and endorsing this poem. Freycinet Peninsula. If there is no one to welcome us to this country, with its ringing cicadas and water ribbon, grass frogs syncopating in its freshwater crucible, then we have come here unwelcomed. If there is no one to welcome us to this lagoon country, where the lone swan trails its single signet beneath the loving gaze of the sea eagle, her hungry young at home in their tower of sticks, then we have come here unwelcomed. If there is no one to welcome us to this shore where we have left tracks in the pristine glasswork, then we come here unwelcomed. There is the time it will take for each string of salt pearls to unbend inside the shadow of our footprints. There is also the deep prehistory of swamp memory, and there are the present owners of this house we have entered unbidden. If there is no one to welcome us to this forest country, in whose unfading patience the grass trees shiver, then we have come here unwelcomed. I think I have time for two more, is that right? Do you think?
Sure.
Wooden horse. On your crude wooden sled, you were once a broom, a length of rope, a handful of offcuts, 2 screws, and 8 3-inch nails. You were not quite symmetrical. 1 rocker pine, 1 hardwood, and your plank torso is beveled more on the left than the right. Your hard, round eye has been drilled right through your planked face from above. This gives you a bright, dark vacancy. To a child, this might lend perspicacity. Squatting and peering, I can see the evening ocean through your clear gaze. The same bit or the whole for the dowel handle that impales your jaw. Your profile is not equine, more border Leicester. Your crimped rope tail and mane have been mere tufts of stubble, like nibbled wallaby grass since you first came our way. Your broom legs are so straight, slender as a racehorse's. I forgot to say that there is some pathos about your routed mouth and its odd slope of forbearance. Your broom neck leans forward towards the future. I suspect you never boasted a coat of paint. Nowadays, you are so weathered you might be made of driftwood, a horse of the sea. Your balance is exact. The ellipse of each crude arc rocker knows how to balk just before the tipping point. Earless, eyeless yet not blind, bereft of mane and tail, you are steadfast, gazing through that vacant eye to east and west, seeing not in your long life that children grow old, but how from each tide rolls the continuum of each wave. And I'll finish with a short poem that's close to home. It's called Prince of Wales Bay, which is just in Outer Hobart. Ali and his bride, who prefers not to be named, are out walking in the early winter evening. Sleeping ducks murmur as they pass. The old dockyard ripples upside down in the light from the few street lamps. A drunk appears out of the night and scruffs his shirt, tearing it. "You think you are tougher than me?" "No," says Ali, "I think you are tougher than me." He's being serious, but maybe the drunk thinks he's being smart and bites him hard on the arm. The ducks have fallen silent. The awkward ring of tooth marks slowly fills with blood. The drunken man wanders away somewhere in the dark, out of sight. So, thinks Ali, a man in his new country has tried to take a piece of him. It hurts, but he can live with the red and purple bruises made by one man's teeth. He has lost a father to gunfire, a young brother and sister. The pain that is imprinted on his biceps is only the size of a man's mouth. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Sarah. It's a real honour to have you read and have you with us. So thanks again. We're going to hear now from Sarah Pearce. Hi, Sarah. Sarah's a poet, editor, and academic from Adelaide. Her PhD explored the suffering female body in the works of Emily and Charlotte Bronte from a contemporary feminist perspective. Her creative and scholarly work appears in Text, Writing from Below, Meniscus, Aeternum, and Outskirts, and her writing interests include the Gothic, queer identity, female embodiment, and feminist theory. Great to have you with us, Sarah. Looking forward to hearing you read.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Great. Okay, so I'm zooming in tonight from Ghana land. I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge that sovereignty has never been ceded. Going to read a number of fairly short poems this evening, all written in the last 12 months or so. I'll begin with one called Ophelia. One charred misstep and she's gone, sunny wisp of a lover. Grey blue eyes turn to green, algae, lips submerged to choke on salt secrets, silence. Lilies block out light and love. Ophelia in the bathtub, mossed with fear. Sketch of a woman on fire, smoky throat in the distance. Fading. This next poem is called My Mother's House. 1. There is a lemon tree outside my mother's kitchen window. Bright, buttery globes swing gently in winter sunshine. In my mother's house, there is no longer a brother. He moved a year ago. I stay in his room in a different bed. In my mother's house, there is a new dog. The morning I caught a plane, she ran away. My mother found her, frozen, down the road. In my mother's house, there is a sad man. 2. In my mother's house, there is a word. It starts with C, the biggest word of all. We cut him out, we cut him in, we cut him a deal. They'll take a piece, or maybe more, and what is left can stay in my mother's house. 3. Jacaranda, thunder, barking dog in the storm. The lemon tree has lost its fruit. Catheter, shifting feet, fear in the blood. My brother wouldn't look him in the eye. 4 months between lemons and jacaranda. In my mother's house, there lives an illness, more than one. The man is still sad. There is nothing to be done about that. He is alive. These next 2 poems were written in April of this year. They're my two pandemic-themed poems. The first is called April. The halting trip and skip of hope. I wonder if we will find enough flowers to fill our bellies, to last through winter. Fingers crossed around paper stamens, I will be found half buried, a mound of gin-soaked peonies, folded from the pages of my favourite novels. The second of that pair is called Where Do We Go From Here? My grandmother is 91. My mother has asthma, heart medication, cancer, radiotherapy, aneurysm lurking. I must wash and wash and wash these hands. There is a puddle of methadone on my bedroom floor, and I just bled for 8 days. I can't sleep or see beyond the night. I'm having the best sex of my life, and I've never been so scared. I don't understand the distance between inside and out. My front door too thick to measure with one cracked palm. The rim of my sacrum drags rough against the question of tomorrow. This next one is called The End of Love. Dam, flow, hollow keg. We tapped the root and sides, ignored the empty ring. Off the map, but nowhere good. Wrought glass helmet won't keep your head above the waves. Trickle, stop, start. Thirst, desert, dark. Did we slip through the eye of our needle? There's more than one way to unravel love. The chance missed to fill our cracks with gold. The last blunt shove, brittle hearts spider shatter. One tap of flint-honed heels. I lift the noose and toss it back. The pick hangs wicked at my hip. These next two were both written within a couple of months of each other at the end of last year, and they speak to one another. The first is called Glass Skin Charcoal Soul. My wicked sister, tiny precious pea, hides yet amidst the padding. Yellow eyes, yellow fingers grasping pestle, chicken legs, 7 years of itching. I try to crush myself down to a diamond, hard and sharp as glitter. Glass skin, glass slipper, glass smile. Transparent bottle, catch the light and keep it. I try to build a raft of bones to fly me to the stars. Land bound, I am soft graphite thoughts, dull as an old sponge tossed under the sink, flaking, fading, failing. You could rub me out with a cheap eraser. Glass skin, charcoal soul, Baba Yaga, the hag, riding her empty mortar. The second in that pair is called He Talks of Bones. Once, twice, 1,000 thundering times, he talks of bones, steel and light. Tiny emeralds flicker or raging sun. I wonder if he sees the bones slip from my lips, half chewed and wet. I wonder if he sees the charcoal or the glass, the raft or the stars. This next poem is dedicated to one of my absolute best friends in the whole world, and it's called Sapphic Granite. Solidified magma, the smell of you in the dark. Too shy to touch me, porphyritic sister, inverted nipples held close to your heart. Silver fox, my rock. In 40 years, will I still be rolling you darts, reading you poems, shy mouths in the dark. Now, I've got 3 short poems left, and they're all dedicated to my beautiful fiance. The first is called After B and P, and that's B for Brendan and P for Paddy Smith. Don't look down. I beg the ice not to crack, firm enough to hold the blade. Yesterday we tasted snow. Sugar steeple melts at midday sun. Sweet altar bleeds ink and truth. Soft rivered tongue, rib and palm. Mouth open, melting, I come to drink. This next one doesn't have a name yet. I think I only finished it maybe this morning, but it goes. Peridot, purple glass, dim light, single crack, perpetual point in white space rainbow, lips upon lips on lips. We turn without, invert and in. Synchronous scenes in cells, breath seeps and shudders. In our mind's sky, everyone waits for a bowl of noodles that will never arrive. And this is the last poem of mine for this evening, and it's called You Kiss Me Like a Conversation. Curled around me, pussy purrs in the hollows of my neck, nudges thighs, drinks the cream with wicked grin. Giddy wriggle, noses rub, he nuzzles into me, puzzled gasp, licks along slick, soft edges. Words drip, fingertips across my belly and lips, swollen, rich. Stung with love, as Sappho said, the softest boy I've ever had. Thank you very much. Thanks, Lachlan.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Yeah, it's really fantastic to have all these poets from various parts of the country and different styles and yeah, and different kind of subject matters and intensities for various poems. So it's really, really wonderful to have you with us. I'd like to introduce our final poet for this evening and for the conference, Claire Albrecht from Newcastle. She's writing her PhD in poetry at the University of Newcastle. She was the 2019 Emerging Writers Festival Fellow at the State Library of Victoria, and she'll be a resident at the Helene Wurlitzer Foundation in New Mexico in 2020, perhaps. And then her debut chapbook, Pinky Swear, launched in 2018, and she runs a couplet poetry night in Newcastle. So thank you so much, Claire, for being with us. And it'll be great to hear you read tonight.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm here on what we call in Warramai land, and pay my respects to elders, past, present, emerging, and anyone who may be joining us today. I'm going to start with 3 newer ISO poems. All my old poetry sounds just really trivial these days in the context of isolation and fires and everything that is terrible that's happened recently. So I find that I'm only reading new stuff at the moment, so you'll have to bear with me. They're all pretty fresh. This poem is called Cell Safety. When you rub your eyes deep with long fingernails, you feel the push and pull of the rubbing tides, these slippery, wet pools inside your skull. You rub and rub like you are trying to burst an egg yolk, which is a single cell, you heard, just a bobbing, lonely mass. Your eye cells multiply, iris on iris on iris, probing in on each other. When you rub, the reflections run into the next frame, like unfocused binoculars looking out to sea. Twin boats on the water, twin whales. The gaze that multiplies the world and unveils the mirror. Now there are hundreds of whales waiting their turn to be real, each believing it more than the next, and sparkling, Each drop of spray holds a whale eye perfectly framed, perfectly forced into forever. Sometimes it helps you to forget these small infinities, return to the yoke and rub her wall cell's solitude. This next poem is called Abstracting the Contract We Make with Ourselves. Your reflection atrophies like a Dali, like cheese dripping off toast, in this where-nothing weather that expects something from you. If you can imagine, if that's a thing we all can do still, then imagine this. A house, zoom into a boxy room, but the walls in a house are windows, and they're all exploding all the time. A pulsing as they go, one by one, like a scale, only to reform and refract each other's breaking moments, rhythmic and cyclical. Crash scattering like a quick exhale, like the woof 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 of a woman in childbirth as she pumps the bones out of your hand. You witness the fractious forming and unforming of anxious sublimity. That's the difference between a pinky swear and a handshake. It's the pressure, not the promise. Your sweat on mine, the sticky date our fingerprints make in this psychosomatic social contract. You hear tiny tinkling screams of broken glass as it tightens. In a stinking haze, you hook and squeeze for pleasure, for security, for a second outside of yourself, and find an empty room. And this last quick new one before I move on is called Blank Slates. I can't write funny poems anymore. I am no longer charming. No wry remarks on MasterChef season 12. Pasta is just pasta, and I am just on the couch again, shutters closed, and I can only write lines like, mirrors are blank in the absence of light, and what if I never went outside again? And you'd look at me like, oh no, like you don't know where to pull me from. So now I'm going to read from my chapbooks of extended series, Ever the Vivisector, which is writing back to Patrick White's The Vivisector. I'm just going to share screen just so you can follow. If that helps, feel free to just ignore it if you'd rather not. I read the first half of this in my paper on Tuesday morning. So apologies if you missed that and I'm just dumping you in the deep end here, but you'll catch up. So I'll just share. Hey, get out of there. Okay. So we're about halfway through the novel, The Vivisector, and the main character, Hurtle, has just come back from Greece, where he's left a woman there. So chapter 7. And so she died while you strained and struggled just to take a shit. Another unsuccessful exorcism, or a warning against the seed you're sowing, whose moon should be infertile, whose manly ferry should be turned back, whose child, good God, the child. Chapter 8. I don't want to write this chapter. Your resurrected sister, the only saving grace. Hold my hair back while I hurl. Tell me you won't follow through with this, you old man. Tabula rasa, Hurtle, don't. You are tangled in the aspidistra which climbs up your feet like a child wanting candies. Why won't you move? Things which flower at ground level are trouble always. Looking up, thighs all heady and quartered, with eyes who see all and do nothing, as the jewel unfolds and fosters this disaster. Rhoda, who herds the cats, returns, a mascot, a marsupial, your scapegoat. I'm afraid, dear Hurtle, if you allow this child to seal that wax, it's your horse flesh should be hacked. To be born vivisected, a knife in the ribs, All eyes turned in to watch the curve would be like torture, like the pain of a poem unfolding, a painting in parts, tasting each as their own. I can't help it, you say, if I turned out to be an artist. Well now, we all know you can. Once a child stood with mother screeching outside a window display, a dog all splayed and cut to pieces, curing in the air. With all those greys and drizzle, surely this should be your horror story. But today, fingers pressing inside that old man's coat, the butcher is a turn on. Kathy, no. Invoking deafness to an abuse of power, right now you can end, unconduct whatever cacophony has begun, a distorted symphony that should not be born. The baton goes down, abort, abort, abort. This bloody piano, this rushing, gushing of blood, this corpse, this piano flesh, this sagging, wretched piano, wiping grease across its keys, knife across strings, snapping. Sir, you are a murderer again. I can imagine the drought, the yellowing, the jaundice of your gutters as you waste all your water on waiting, and pink Rhoda prone downstairs, turning red with the blood in her throat and then black on her squirreling furs, both dreaming of your prize horse, her own mouth foaming, biting down, backing out, skin primed for the pairing. The piano concerto, 9, might have rounded off our rondo, but something about that tumble of diamonds reminds one of a mother, whips up thick scents, and here you are again, throwing up your love in sticky fits, a feverish, swooning boy, and I am embarrassed. I'm always cold and frightened in the beginning, and now we're coming down. I am so afraid. Chapter 9. You've dragged him out again in first person, owned him, a Roman numeral I, alone in this infernal afternoon, among buses of school children, well-to-do ladies, you walk, crotchety now and melting like ashen bark on the beach, who never ever looked humble. You stand in front of yourself, those painted mirrors, broken and stained glass filled with boo, or was it Nance, Hero, Kathy? Tucked into these corners of the sensory, they stare out like spectres for you to declare a major work, like you made them, like they needed you to become real, you pathetic, entitled, you pure, selfish old man. These paintings are echoes of what you never thought to hear. At some point, you had to fall. Of course, it was with crusty Cottbus, and a sheep's heart rolling wearily. A secret colour, tinkling of chandeliers, exploding from his flies. And all of them there again, he a wee boy in the laundry, inhaling sheets, they in the gallery, laughing, sparkling, clinking cups, spit and lipstick, talking, laughing, ha, 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 licking teeth, turn to blood, turn to rubies, in the golden light reflecting a body, a back, a curve, a cliff. Your sediment tracks down through rivulets towards the infernal river, the gutter bursting, the womb. Chapter 10. Indigo. I dig, oh, an ego, and I go, go, go. I die, and you go, ever the vivisector. Thank you. That's me for this evening. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thanks so much, Claire. That was fantastic. I think everyone would agree that tonight's been a remarkable night of poetry. Thank you to all the poets and the way that you've shared works that are fresh, that are written as recently as this morning or this afternoon. So that's a real honour to be able to see works in that stage of their life, and to have those shared with us has been amazing. It seems to me I'd love to go out with a lemonade with all of you after this, and that's very sad that we don't get to hang out a little more. but one of the affordances, I think, of Zoom is that it has brought us together from around Australia and internationally as well. And I wanted to say special thank you to our international visitors and those who are listening in from around the world and watching from around the world. Finally, I'd like to say thanks to Roger, Roger Osborne, who's done a remarkable job of organising this conference. Yeah, it's been a real honour to be part of what is a historic, I think, moment for the study of Australian literature, and to end the conference with poetry readings like this is really exciting, and it's a real privilege. Yeah, poets, you can take a look at the chat if you get a chance, because there's some wonderful comments from some really astute readers and listeners there. And so thanks one and all for coming along, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend. So all the very best.